The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Bye. Good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Lines are open. It's open line today. Call 66 13 68. You can text on 166 177. WhatsApp on 166 177, but you'll need us in your contacts. And email studio@manxradio.com. This is where you have your say about whatever it is you want to have a chat about. Last night there was a public meeting held about the Manx utility plan for wind farms in the south of the Isle of Man. Residents in Arbury and Rushen expressed their concerns about the closeness to homes and the impact it would have on wildlife. While the MUA weren't there, they didn't send an official representative, but in a statement provided to Manx Radio, the chair of the MUA, Tim Crookall MHK, said it wouldn't be appropriate to attend. So were you there? What did you think of it? Tim Glover was due to be there, one of the constituency MHKs, but Tim and his wife Jane sadly have tested positive for COVID, so they didn't go. Were you there? And what do you feel about it all? Does anybody know who stopped people booking GP appointments on the patient access account? Because GPs ask you now to phone at 8:30, but you just can't get through. Receptionists just can't cope with the calls, says Terry. Stupid decision. Is this putting too much pressure on receptionists? And David said, I was surprised to hear the Mountain Road close yesterday and again today to enable all the racing signs to be removed. The MGP may have finished on Monday, but there are still a lot of visiting bikers on the Isle of Man, many of whom will have been looking forward to having a final ride around the full course before going home. And surely the work could have been left perhaps until next week, when everybody will have gone back and left a little of the tourist legacy. Low-frequency noise may be a problem to come from wind turbines at Erie Staine. Richie texts in on 776. For sea life, it's a problem too, from huge diesel engines and propellers of container ships and tankers and cruise liners. Dead whale strandings may be so caused, could be due to starvation as their food sources fail. Warming oceans, says Richie, are fast destroying marine food chains, from kelp to krill to cod to penguins to seals to whales to polar bears. And it's our problem too, says Richie. Lots of messages in yesterday, and I didn't quite get to everyone yesterday, but there was one particularly about what plans that the government actually has. We were talking kind of existentially about the plans that the government has for the future, says Pete. They don't seem to have any plans or directions. They'd probably counter that by saying they would. And John said, we were talking about brownfield sites, in particular the Victoria Road Prison. There was an idea years ago for the Victorian prison to be turned into a hotel or tourist attraction. I don't think that included slopping out, though, John. Yes, a bit late now because they've knocked the whole thing down, although there are prisons around the world that have been turned into hotels. I think there's one that even gives the East Berlin experience where that's concerned. Juan's on now. Hi, Juan.
Hey, Andy, how are you today?
Very good, thanks. It's a lovely day, isn't it?
It's a nice day, yeah. A little bit cloudy, but it's nice. Not too much wind.
And no cruise ship.
And no cruise ship. No cruise ship. So I'm ringing about the meeting last night at Arbury.
Did you go?
I did indeed. I didn't do any. I didn't offer my any points of view. I thought it was down for the locals to say their piece. It was their meeting, but I was interested in a lot of the comments that was made. And just firstly on the your reporter that covered it. And I think the report was on this morning, I believe. There was more like 130 people there, not 75. There was 90-odd seats in the hall, and people were packed in the back and every standing room available.
Well, they're spilling out into outside, apparently, weren't they?
Yes, they were. There was a lot of people there, a lot of interest. There was some very good speakers, some very educated speakers, scientists who have retired and living over here. Graham Fox-Hume spoke on the geothermal side and why that's not being pushed. And some very interesting comments from Phil Gorn, who obviously was involved with the Dong Energy and a lot of stuff when he was in the role as MHK. And there's, the consensus, I think they'd done a show of hands at the end. I think there was 10 abstained. There was no one for the wind farm generation. But I would imagine about 130-odd hands all showed that they were not in support of this. So I think that kind of shows where the people the feelings are on this.
It would have been a brave person who put their hand up to support it, surely, in that atmosphere.
Well, yes, I suppose it would have been. Yeah, I suppose it would have been. But if you've got valid points and valid reasons, then surely you should put your hand up anyway. Regardless of what everyone else thinks. If you've got valid points, then run with it. I think what came out of the meeting. Among other things, Kerry said the amount of FOIs that's had to be asked for from government, and a lot of redactions on that. And I think what came from this was the transparency. Again, this runs with other subjects that we're talking about with government, is a government that came in under the banner of transparency is certainly not being transparent. Comyn seem to be running the shooting match here. Manx utilities seem to have a lot of power, and there is bills in place of not doing this kind of stuff on the upper lands. So these safeguards are trying to be got round by government at the moment, which is quite concerning that they're doing this stuff, which is our future, and we're going to have to pay for this. And they seem to be angling their way around these situations without getting the local people involved. And I find this, with everything else that's going on with government, quite concerning at the moment. And I do think people should take more interest in what's going on and go to these meetings, especially this big one that's coming up at the Villa Marina, and voice your opinion to your representatives, because there's so much stuff going on with Comyn, and it just doesn't feel right at the moment. They're following agendas that's going to lead this island right down the pan, I think.
I'm not speaking for the government, and I wouldn't pretend to, but I'm guessing they may say, look, we were elected to govern, and we're governing.
Yeah, and people that are elected can be unelected if they do something wrong. A point was made last night by a lady there about, and I think this point's been made on here before, Andy, we've talked about it, about big companies not staying here if we don't follow certain agendas with the carbon credits, etc. And this is kind of a blackmail situation. If these companies, which obviously are run by the banking institutes and back to BlackRock, these subjects that are far over a lot of people's heads and they don't take it in. But if they're threatening countries like ours and islands like ours to do these things, and these things have been put in place not for our good, but for the good of people making profit, there's something seriously wrong. And if we've got a government that backs down and bows down to this, we've got a serious problem.
OK, all right. June, good to hear from you. Thanks for being with us.
Take care, Andy.
And let's go to Peter, who's with us now. Hi, Peter.
Oh, hello, it's Peter Murcott here, and I'm not going to speak about the sort of subject you'd probably expect from me. Something totally, utterly different. We're coming to harvest season, and various churches that have harvest festivals will no doubt be scanning the books to find something, and maybe something a bit different. And so what I've rung up about is something a bit different, and it's Manx. Now, most Manx people will know "Hear us, O Lord, from heaven, our dwelling place," which is often called the Manx Evening Fisherman's Hymn, although I did some research on that, and there's no evidence that the Manx fishermen ever sang it. But I've found two totally unknown Manx hymns from the early 19th century. I put a tune to them. One's called O Nation, Christian Nation, and that's an aspiration today, of course. It wasn't back in the years when it was written. The other one's called a harvest hymn for a wet season. We lift our hearts to thee. And I put what I think is an appropriate tune to both of them. Point is, if anyone wants something a little shade different from the norm, and something that's actually set to a singable tune, if they'd like to give me a ring, I will send them a copy. There's no charge, as long as I don't think I'll get thousands somehow. There aren't those many churches today. And my number's 611483. It's in the book.
Where did you find them?
Well, I do a lot of research on Manx history, and I go quite often into Manx newspapers from the 19th century in the Manx Museum, and I've written quite a few booklets on different aspects of history in the Isle of Man, which are actually archived in the museum now. And every so often, I want to just, if I've got a spare moment, I like to have a little look and see if there are any hymns going that were specifically Manx, and preferably ones that nobody's come across before. And I've actually unearthed another one which was written by an 18-year-old who lived at I think he lived at 10 Mona Street, and that I found when I was looking at newspapers for 1872. It's never been used. It's totally lost. And again, I put a tune to it, and I've used it. So it's Manx Museum. I unearth all kinds of other things as well about the 19th century. And although I'm not originally Manx, I have learned a lot of Manx history and have been able to unearth quite a few things.
That's fascinating. So, what's your telephone number again? 611?
611483. It's in the book. There's only one Murcott in the island, so it's no good me hiding behind a name because I'm the only one. I'm in the telephone book anyway, so I'm not letting anything out that's supposed to be secret. I'm not XD or anything like that.
All right. That's good to hear from you. Thanks, Peter.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Let's, we are coming to that very special time of the year. And there is, as Peter was talking about, the Manx Museum, and of course, Culture Vannin has got lots about and the Melia, the harvest times, time for celebration and tradition, and the centre really of the Babinamelia, which is the corn dolly created from the last sheaf of corn. The Babinamelia takes pride of place in the centre of the Melia celebrations, is kept on display for good luck until next year. The practice of making corn dollies is right across Europe. I remember seeing some years ago in Austria. They're quite big on corn dollies in Austria. But the Manx practice on the Isle of Man is unique in the form which the Babin takes and in the wider way that it fits into the Melia celebrations. You want to look about that. Culture Vannin is your place. Culturevannin.im will tell you all about the Melia. I love Harvest Festival, don't you? Love them. Julian's on now. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. Everything that Ewan said, totally correct. I might have been north of 130, actually. I mean, I've never seen a hall that packed before, I don't think. At least not since the Villa Marina thing a few years ago. Everybody that raised their hands were asked, and everybody made excellent points. Everybody was very clear. Some points that were made that hadn't been thought of before as well. I think a couple of them. It was really, really good. Everybody was excellent there.
What was the mood of the meeting, Julian?
Well, it was. If it was a referendum, if you take a snapshot of that as a referendum for the Isle of Man, this would be a dead duck right now, without intending to be a pun, actually. I noticed also, apart from the omission of the MUA, I didn't see anybody from Manx BirdLife or the Manx Bat Group, and I find this strange because they seem very quiet about all this. I find this very surprising.
Well, do you draw any conclusion from that?
Well, without somebody coming on and explaining why there isn't a problem, despite, there's some very big, the one from Germany, the report saying per megawatt, 55 dead bats a year. Well, if you've got, they're talking about 20 odd megawatts from the wind, 20 times 55 is rather a lot of dead bats, isn't it? I noticed actually on this morning's Ben Hartley programme, there were a couple of messages that came in. There was somebody called Keith Kay who said hen harriers and buzzards are bigger killers than turbines. Unfortunately, I don't think this chap has the concept of how an ecosystem works, because if you haven't got raptors, you've got lots of rodents, and guess what they like to eat? Chicks and eggs. So, it's this circle of life thing. You can't just turn around and say, well, we can accept this because we'll get rid of the hen harriers and the buzzards. That doesn't make any sense. And I think somebody else made a comment this morning about it being a NIMBY fest. But if you've got Mike Profit saying we're going to have 100 of these turbines, and I think on the Paul Moulton show he said, they'll be smaller, around 2 megawatts. Well, a 2 megawatt turbine is 410 feet high, which is about as high as the Albert Tower is above sea level over Ramsey. So these are not small things, and 100 of those is not going to be something that's going to be a NIMBY fest unless you call the whole of the Isle of Man population a NIMBY fest. And there were people from the north that were at that meeting as well, and they're worried about this as well.
There's nothing wrong, surely, with being a NIMBY. That's how you stand up for your location. So, I don't know whether NIMBY is a sort of detrimental name or what, really. But I'm just anxious to just investigate, as you say, that if the charities that are involved in the preservation of wildlife, and in particular bats. Now, remember, bats are protected species. If you get bats in your house, you can't just get rid of bats. You can't just brush them away or, knock them away with a pole. They're protected species. So why would you think the people who are dedicated to the preservation of bats wouldn't show up at something like that?
I was on the bike the other day and I saw a hen harrier floating around, and that was very close to Erie Stane. And then as I came back up from the Arble, he was over Erie Cushling, or another one of his type. So there's plenty of them around there. But, they're on a red list on the Isle of Man, the birds endangered list. So it just makes me wonder, are we just going to tear up our legislation? And I understand there's existing legislation about not putting up tall structures on uplands. So is that going to be rewritten? Something similar to, I don't know, hate speech laws or something where, our freedom of speech is being sort of quietly torn up in the background. It just makes me wonder if legislation quietly, and that's why the FOIs are dragging their feet or they're heavily redacted, because it seems that we're not having that transparency to actually see what is going on. Well,
it would be interesting to know, and if anybody from the bird preservation, the wildlife, or what have you, or the Manx Bat Group can say. I mean, if they say, look, for what we perceive as the greater good, it's worth sacrificing a few bats and a few birds. That's fine, but you can't just say nothing.
That's right. It was interesting. I spoke to a chap yesterday who was in there from a renewable energy company from Manchester. It was a slightly sideways conversation because the chap represents things like battery storage, which of course is part of the equation, because if the wind turbines aren't turning, how do you keep your base load so you can flick your lights on when we've got, at night with no wind, obviously no sunshine for solar. And he's been involved with a battery storage solution in Manchester, where he's from. And I just ran the figures with him, and it turns out that if you were to install the same system on the island, which would be a 400 megawatt hour battery, that would cost £200 million, which is what the one that's in Manchester's cost. But that would keep the island up for 5.5 hours, based on what we need. So £200 million, which is what is that? That's more than double the Liverpool terminal for a 5.5 hour buffer if the turbines don't turn or solar. But he also suggested that there was solutions using gravity, like throwing heavy weights on a rope or a cable down mine shafts to use the thing. I'm just wondering, Andy, can you think of any sort of hefty things that we could throw down some, like Laxey Mine, for example, on the end of a rope?
I can't think of, but I mean, if I said them, I'd get into awful trouble.
Well, yeah, but those were the sorts of figures that were bandied around in terms of if you haven't got wind, what's the solution? Because I think Mr. Langham Newton said to me on the radio that they were thinking of filling the Pulrose Power Station hall with batteries. Well, if it's 200 million to hold the island up for just over 5 hours, that doesn't look like a very good deal, does it?
Well, we watch and we wait. There is something that, there's another strand of thought, is that this is never going to happen. But the government are saying it's going to happen, so at least if it doesn't happen, they can all say, well, we tried and nobody wanted it. So it could be that this has just been set up to fail, and it just won't happen. The practicalities of building a wind farm at Eriestrain are so enormous as to be almost insurmountable. And the fact that they seem dedicated to the MUA doing this and not letting, there are at least 4 private companies that want to put renewables on the Isle of Man, and they seem to be not letting them through the door.
Yeah, and just the way it's being done, because planning hasn't given permission yet, but this is sort of like signing up a hefty contract with a builder to build yourself a house on a plot of land that doesn't have planning permission yet. Unless the planning authority is going to be got around in some way, and they already know that it can go through. Because how else? I mean, nobody in their right mind would even have an extension put on a house without planning first, surely. Okay,
all right, thanks for that. Good to hear from you.
Thanks, Andy.
We got a message in. I'll just try and find the message in from the Manx BirdLife, who apparently were there. But more messages in. Your caller is absolutely correct about the MGP. Port Erin was packed with motorcycles yesterday, and overhearing their conversations, they were discussing where they could go as the Mountain Road was closed. Mountain Road's closed till 4:30 today, but there are still people around. Politicians stood for green aims at the last election, text to 313, but we weren't told they'd spend £40 million on windmills while Manx Care collapses. I don't think it's collapsing, but it's costing more money. But they all covered themselves in green. Everybody, just about everybody, of all the candidates, they all said renewables and net zero. Everybody was chirruping away about net zero and green aims. So we can't say that we weren't told. Eddie's on now. Hi, Eddie.
Hiya, how are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Not been on for a long while. I usually get on when there's something quite interesting and serious.
Okay, you're very welcome back.
Thank you. I attended the meeting last night, and the first thing I'd like to point out is some of the figures that were given. I arrived quite late, and when I got there, the hall was absolutely packed to the brim. People were standing in the doorways, the kitchens and everything. But on top of that, there was people arriving outside, and because they couldn't get in, they left. So I would say there's maybe 20, 30 more outside who didn't get in. And I would put the figure at more like 180, at least. So that just clears that up, I hope.
And what did you think of the meeting?
I thought it was great. I thought it was it was forecast because, I think everybody's ideas of these wind things are just silly, really. I think the government's on a downwards manoeuvre. They're just, I don't know why they've gone this way. For the last 8 months, I've kept quiet on the radio because we've been doing a lot of studying about this, and I've made a list of, I'm up to 27 at the moment, against the wind farm and nothing for it. And I wrote all these things down at another occasion. I'll read them out to you or send them to you.
Well, give us the top 5, Eddie. What have you got?
Well, the top thing, number 1 is the agenda was green, wasn't it? Well, there's nothing green at all about a wind turbine. When you think the Amazon forest, the balsa wood, they're cutting that down to make the balsa to go in these things. They give off, the second one is toxic. They give off toxic paint flying off it all over the place, pollution, which is, again, we're thinking of the green things, which are all excuse these days, is green. The turbines have got to be buried when they finish because they can't recycle them. It goes on and on and on, Andy. There isn't a top 5, really. There's a top 50.
All right.
But the other things are, there was an awful lot of people there from, very rare that I say Juvens needs correcting, but there was a lot of ornithology there last night.
We've had a couple of emails then saying Manx bird life were there.
They were there. I'm an ornithologist. I was there, and there was other topics. We were sat just waiting for the opportunity, but there were so many other serious things that were mentioned and on 2 or 3 occasions, I think the killing of birds was mentioned, the killing of wildlife and everything. And I believe that there's going to be another meeting shortly to involve the farmers, because all the farmers are worried about the pollution of the fields and loss of fields.
Okay, all right, Eddie.
So, yeah,
good to have you back. Don't leave it so long next time.
I'll try my best.
All right, thanks for that.
See you later.
Oh, thanks. Bye. Good to hear your opinion today. 27 minutes to 1.
Feeding friends and family with the finest the island has to offer. The Forge Smokehouse and Grill Santon. Fresh Manx produce marinated, slowly cooked, grilled and smoked to perfection right here and served in a gorgeous setting. Just walk in anytime, no booking needed. Parties, family gatherings and weddings, the perfect venue for any occasion. And don't forget our large marquee for any event. Visit theforge.im and see.
DT Gas.
Is your boiler costing a fortune to run?
DT Gas.
DT Gas will replace it with an efficient Alpha and X complete with 13-year parts and labour warranty. Or save even more with the Alpha E-Tech hybrid system, the heat pump package that works with any new Alpha gas boiler to give you the best of both worlds. Call Dean at DT Gas now on 264 040. 264 040.
DT Gas.
Construction waste today.
Tells recycle for another day.
A builder skip or two.
Tells Skips will bring to you.
At Tells Skip Hire and Waste Disposal in Snugborough, you only pay for the waste you bring. For waste disposal and skips, give us a call on 677 137. That's 677 137. Visit Tells today or find Tells Limited on Facebook.
Call Tells Skips today.
677 137.
On Saturday the 16th of September, it's time to break free with Queen Radio Gaga, when Manx Radio DJ Chris Williams will create a kind of magic on the dining car. So dress up, enjoy a 3-course meal and Queen's greatest hits. Tickets £49 per person, including food. Visit rail.im or book now on 697 457. Queen Radio Gaga, in association with your nation station, Manx Radio.
Get ready for another winning weekend on Manx Radio.
There's a £100 voucher for road fuel or home heating up for grabs this weekend from Manx Petroleum. So check your tank now.
Visit manxradio.com and answer the competition question for your chance to win. You can enter as many times as you like.
Then make sure you're listening to Manx Radio Breakfast on Monday morning when we'll be announcing the winner.
Make this your winning weekend with your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Past my 25 to 1. Why is the Isle of Man always behind the UK? UK's moved from installing onshore wind turbines. The Isle of Man wants to start. They should be offshore. End of, says Alison. That's what we need. For 70 years, the world's followed the agendas of the banks and big oil and gas companies. I think it's longer than 70 years. The British government still does. But there are many mixed motives fueling the green agenda. Of course, big investors will want to profit, but But do Green supporters and protesters wear suits or carry brollies or briefcases? No, they don't, says Richard. Well, maybe some do. And of course, big business investors will want profit. This is a new revolution. It's a new industrial revolution, and there's money to be made, and everybody knows there's money to be made. It just depends how we navigate our way through this, how we get the energy that we can use at the price that everybody can afford. And as I mentioned, there are. I mean, certainly Mr. Whitaker at Ballabeg is offering a big solar farm there to feed in to that 33 kilovolt substation in Castletown. That's 90-odd thousand solar panels around Ballabeg. That's what they're offering. There's the one that Mr. Profit is offering as well. There is a possibility of a big project in the north of the Isle of Man that could use all sorts of technology with the possibility of investment from abroad, from reputable energy companies from abroad. We've got the Ørsted possibility of offshore wind. So we have options. It depends what we do. Scaremongering, says 653, our electricity isn't only going to come from wind. If the political will is there, we could be self-sufficient within the next decade, text to 353, from a number of different renewable sources. Almost all the MHKs were for renewables, quite right they were, unless it seems it is to go in their parish. 653's a point. Michelle Haywood didn't show up last night, did she? Remember, she said, if I see a wind turbine, I see a community that's embracing the future. Pat, over the past couple of years, I've been trying to contact anybody in the Isle of Man Government Properties Department. Many emails and many phone calls and messages. To date, I just can't get a reply, except from a junior executive to say somebody will contact you shortly. Has anybody else had similar issues contacting government? The Isle of Man Government Properties Department. Have you got through on time? I couldn't get into the meeting, says Chris in Colby. I'm against the wind farm as I think it's a waste of money and it has a huge impact on the environment. Question is, Chris, where do you think it should be? If it's not going to be in the south, happy to have it in the north. Haven't heard much from the north about what's going to happen. Interestingly, text to 557. His guest said how much he enjoyed staying at the Golf Links Hotel. When are the planners going to give the go-ahead for a much-needed hotel in the south, says John. Thank you for that point, John. Let's go to the lines. And Roger's on now. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Andy. They're completely opposite, completely different to any of the subjects you've had.
Oh, good.
Long story short, but you won't remember, but in about January of this year, I rang you up and said I'd had a letter or a phone call actually from Manx Gas, as they were then, and telling me that I had too much credit. I was paying monthly, and I was in credit. At the time, was about £400 or £500, I think.
Yeah.
And their words, they said they're not allowed by law to hold that credit, and they got no option but to give it to me back.
I do remember you saying that, yes.
Thank you, yeah. What they came to how we came to a compromise afterwards, they said they would bill me for February and March, but they wouldn't actually withdraw any money. That in turn would get rid of the credit. So that's the way it went. I didn't think much more about it. I've just got a letter dated the 29th of the 8th, so just a couple of days ago. Dear customer, we've completed a review of your gas consumption, and we noted that your monthly payment doesn't meet your gas consumption. Therefore, to make up this deficit, we are suggesting, or that the option is to increase my monthly direct debit, currently £109, from next month, 22nd of September, to go up from 109 to 298. That's 300%.
Wow!
People actually get paid to sit in an office and do this. It's
if you're going to go for an increase, you may as well go for a big one.
Yeah. So you could look at it. I've done well for 6 months, but I pleaded with them that that credit balance was my safety net, and that was taken away from me.
And what did they say?
They said that they're not allowed by law to keep a credit in. It's my money. Where I want to put it is for me. But they said they're not allowed to. And here we are 6 months down the line, and they're now going to treble. Yes, I have to pay it, and I've got no choice, but it's going to hurt as well. Treble. And I thought gas prices and things were stabilising. But
well, they're supposed to be on the way down.
Yeah, exactly. So they've come up. I'll probably get another phone call in January. It works about right, doesn't it, to say, oh, you're in credit, we're not allowed to do that. But I just thought, just from a fun aspect, but also a serious aspect, that is really, really stupid, and it just annoys me. And I'm not going to ring them up because it will cost me another lot of money just to actually get through to somebody, or keep putting me on hold and talk to somebody else. So I might just call down there, but it is so stupid, Andy. It really is annoying.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I'm sorry to say most people were giggling when you said that. I know it's not terribly good news for you.
On my chest, I can't change it, but thanks for listening.
All right, good to hear from you. It's 18 minutes before 1. I got a note in from Nick Pinder at the Manx Back Group, just regarding the Manx Back Group's position. Nick is chair of the Manx Back Group. We issued a statement in February regarding our concerns that the current level environmental impact assessments, the EIAs, should be undertaken before any planning permissions finalised and construction of wind farm begins. The MUAs responded to the Manx Back Group's concerns and included the following statement. The Isle of Man Strategic Plan 2016 mandates we must carry out EIAs, environmental impact assessments, for onshore wind, and must adhere to the regulations outlined in the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017. These surveys are carried out over a 2-year period before the design work can take place. 2-year period. Any adverse environmental impacts must also be mitigated as part of the design phase. The Manx Back Group expect that Manx Utilities will follow all current guidance and procedures on EIAs and bats and wind turbines, paying particular attention to a rigorous and transparent approach and the mitigation hierarchy. Well, the Manx Back Group has already been informed that they and other local environmental organisations will be invited as key stakeholders to join the ecological working group in this and external scrutiny committee to raise any ecological concerns that they have with the process. It should be noted that the Manx Back Group, the MUA, is unable to undertake any requests for surveys on private land without the permission of the owners or their contracted project managers. Did you make any sense of that? 2026 these things are meant to be up by.
Welcome to the Ramsey Park Hotel, where there's always a warm welcome and something to enjoy. Nestling beside Muirrook Lake with sea views towards Cumbria, the Ramsey Park Hotel is a stunning destination for your staycation. Take advantage of a fabulous 2-night stay with a glass of champagne on arrival, dinner for 2 nights accommodation and breakfast, all for just £290. For more news on food, offers and events, call 818-123 or visit the Ramsey Park Hotel on Facebook.
Celebrating 45 years, don't miss the B&B Furniture Anniversary Sale. With prices rising elsewhere, B&B is celebrating in style with our anniversary price drop sale. As well as great savings, free accessory vouchers and free bedding packs, look out for our manager specials with up to 45% off and immediate delivery. Plus, everything's available with up to 3 years 0% finance and no deposit to pay. Join the party at B&B Furniture in Snugborough with the 45-year anniversary sale starts this Saturday.
I've been made redundant, and I think it's because I'm going on maternity soon.
My boss isn't doing things by the regulations, but he won't listen to me. He hints I'll lose my job if I say anything.
One of our employees claims we've sacked him unfairly and he's started a tribunal case. I don't know what to do.
Simcox Advocates Employment Team can help. We have the skill and experience to fight your corner. Simcox Advocates, advising businesses and families since 1949. Visit simcox.com.
The Ramsey Garden Centre sale is now on, featuring a huge range of garden items at vastly reduced prices. Don't delay. Grab a garden bargain now. There has never been a better time to visit Ramsey Garden Centre. Open 7 days a week on Albert Road, Ramsey.
I'm Mike Buttle. Join me on Thursday night on Manx Radio at 6 for a second series of journeys on our fantastic heritage railways. This time, I'm looking at the Manx Electric Railway. I'll be talking to some of the workers who keep the trams running, taking a trip to Groudle on the world's oldest operating tramcar, and getting an enthusiast perspective on the MER. Oh, and I'll be attempting to find out which came first, the Manx Electric sign in Douglas or the Hollywood sign in California. That's Thursday night at 6 on Manx Radio, or available online at manxradio.com.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Brian's with us now. Hi, Brian.
Hiya, Andy. I was speaking to you last week about these wind turbines and things.
Yeah.
And I did say that if there was a referendum in this island, there'd be 75% of the population that say they don't want them. Well, I was wrong, wasn't I? According to what happened in Ballabeg last night. I mean, it was 100% didn't want them, but never mind. I'd like to say another thing. See, worrying about birds and turbines, it is a big thing, but hen harriers are not really prone to hitting turbines. You're more likely to get a peregrine falcon, which is our greatest bird of prey anyway on this island. They're more likely to hit turbines in pursuit of the thing. Hen harriers just go around catching small birds, dropping down. They're not fast flyers. Buzzards, we don't have to worry about buzzards. That's a sure thing, because in the last 20 years, this island is full of buzzards now. But what I would say is, this island is one of the greatest places for migratory birds to pass over this island. I mean, we don't just get birds of prey, but we do. We get ospreys. People don't see them, but I see ospreys every year. We've got birds like that, which we don't want them damaging, do we? You know,
I think this is worth mentioning, Brian, in that the Isle of Man is world famous for this, and the Calf of Man as a bird sanctuary, and the fact that we're in the middle of migrating journeys is very, very important. So, you know, this is no red herring. You know, birds are very important to the Isle of Man.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, there's all sorts of birds. We are talking not just seabirds that come onto the Calf. We have all sorts of birds come onto the Calf. We have wonderful birds that pass over this island every year. And these are the birds that's going to be affected. They're coming on big, long trips. They're going to fly into these turbines if they ever get built, which I don't think they will ever be built, with a bit of luck. But never mind. I just thought to put my little oar in there then anyway and just say that, you know.
Well, that's it. And you know, we've had two Twitches on so far today. We've had people talking about the Isle of Man also. I mean, that's the other part of it. Ornithology tourism is big on the Isle of Man. We get a lot of people coming to watch birds on the Isle of Man. Now, you know, who knows what will happen if wind turbines do get built, but I mean, we do have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, we do actually. See, I do a lot of bird watching. I'm always out with my binoculars. And I meet people all from England, you know, on the coastal paths and things like that. And we must keep this in mind. This is one of the things that makes this island so unique. You know, we have a lot of good bird life. And it's a thing that we've got to look after.
Okay,
as
all right.
As I'm concerned.
Appreciate that, Brian. Thanks for calling today.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, lots of messages to get to regarding this. Let's keep some perspective on carbon. The UK contributes 1% of world emissions, says 264. I heard it was 2, but let's say 1. China has emitted more in the last 8 years than we have since the Industrial Revolution. I heard the Edward Pier upgrade is going to cost £66 million. I don't think it's 66 million. And then the upgrade for the Edward Pier, it's the King Edward VIII Pier. I hear, let me see, it's going to cost Just checking on the Manx Radio weather page. £6.61 million. 6.61, not 66. The project was included in this year's budget capital programme. £6.61 million. This is the new major engineering project designed to protect the marine structures from the new boat, which is bigger. So, and also to protect the new boat, which cost £80 million. So let's face it, £6.61 million. It's the project starts, I think it's fairly shortly. The improvements will form part of the wider strategy, which includes an upgrade to the King Edward VIII pier to accommodate the larger vessel. The new Manxman improvements include 2 new large steel piles around the end of the pier, installing 3 new 100-ton mooring bollards close to the link span, and modifying the fenders which prevent the vessel from colliding with the harbour wall. John's with us now. Hi, John.
How are you doing there? Just hearing so much about wind turbines that much and global warming and all the rest of it. Just the main thing is that you either hate them or you love them. And how do you divide people up into 2 different opinions? I've got a wind turbine myself, and it's the best thing since sliced bread. And the birds love it. They actually sit on the blades and they wait for it to spin round and spin off it. They slide on it. The sheep love it as well. They sit down underneath it as if it's a sort of a goddess sort of thing. They sit under it and get the draft from it. So as far as the animals go, they love it. And the birds are getting more birds.
Are you making money from this, John? Are you selling the electricity back?
Well, it's a fantastic machine. I think it's the only machine that can actually pay for itself compared to anything else. So it's a wonderful thing. I love them, but you get the problem with people is you either hate them or love them. So how are you going to... You'll never divide the line between those who hate it because they got it in their minds to hate it, and they pull all the negative things about it. And I'm hearing it all day long about this nonsense that's going on. The fantastic thing, the Isle of Man's got that much wind. There's actually a big ship that was on the TV the other day that's got giant 3 big wind turbines on it. They're going to test it to see how it goes. So we're going back to the sailing days, like. The wind in the Isle of Man's fantastic. It's all nonsense about this thing. Global warming too, there's a lot of scientists are all for saying it's getting hotter, but if you go back years ago, they're saying there's some scientists saying it was far hotter and worse years ago, like. So there's a whole lot of nonsense, and a lot of people are just wanting to believe one side of the story, and then other people hear the other side. So where you draw the line, all I can say is from my experience, they're fantastic machines. The Isle of Man's the best place in the world for them. It doesn't destroy bird life. It actually enhances animals and everything.
How long's your wind turbine been up, John?
Oh, it's been up a few years, and it's a fantastic piece of machinery, like. I'd love to do wind turbine tours, like. They're fantastic things, and people wouldn't put them up if they weren't successful. There's far more nonsense in this other stuff than what there is in that, like. Okay. It's just, you'll never get people persuaded that hate them to like them. You just never will, like, so... It's no point. I don't know how you're going to get around that argument at all. But thanks very much anyway.
Good to hear from you, John. Thanks for being with us.
Bye now.
All right, 6 minutes to 1. That's what we need, a good Manx compromise. In response to comments, yes, all the bat stuff is in there, and I'm against wind turbines totally, says Chris in Colby. I think in the short term, our offshore gas needs harvesting, and we need to go for geothermal as well. I understand Graham Foxhume was there at the meeting last night. Graham, font of all knowledge. Graham and Fred, the geothermal advocates, were trying to find out, by the way, how much it would cost to do a test bore for geothermal on the Isle of Man. Millions, probably. It always does. I tried to contact the Office of Fair Trading yesterday, says Kenny, just trying to get in touch with the government as the Properties Department seemed to be fobbing people off. Kenny said, I tried to contact the OFT yesterday. I'm still waiting for the return call after leaving a message on their answer phone. Douglas always wants everything, says Texter 795, so why don't we stick the wind farm in Douglas? They want everything else. Companies can keep their money on credit for tax evasion reasons. People could hide money in various companies undetected, so that is the reason, says Kim. The reason for what? I wonder, wind turbines, this is, I wonder about wind turbines. What size will they be? A mast 113 metre side, diameter 164 metres, 146 metres, or 252 diameter, says Andy. They haven't actually said what size these things are going to be in the south, or indeed if it is the north of the Isle of Man. £6.6 million. But we can't find £1 million to finish the approved tramway, says John. Oh, whatever. That's called the law of false equivalence, John. But we take the point on 557. Good afternoon, says Ashton. Are you going to run a report on the wind turbine meeting at Ballabeg last night? Well, we did this morning. We are throughout the news. You'll hear something on Update tonight as well. Hello, Cassie. She said, what's the number for those Manx hymns? Hang on, I'll find it somewhere. Peter's on 611483. If you want the Manx, the original, the Manx Harvest Hymns, libretto and music. Back with another open line tomorrow. Thanks to Howie on the phones today.
WINT